Now, what I have for today is a particular video having to do with what could they do with Yoshimitsu to nerf his movesets, right? Now, there's already a lot of hate against Yoshimitsu being a character that can destroy the overall style of play of the game, simply because of Flash, his Samurai Cutter, his unblockables, you know, and even his damage. Now, the video is to just showcase what could they try to do to nerf his movesets. I've mentioned before in a previous video where I have stated on a Google Doc that Kobe has made, where he states exactly what kind of nerfs Yoshi should receive and what buffs he should receive as well. Now, this video is only to basically entail my feelings on the matter as to what they could do to nerf Yoshimitsu. And I'll try my best to be as unbiased as possible. I will add on my few biases into the video to at least explain why I want them there or whatever the case is. So let's move on. Now, first things first, 1-1. 1-1 is +4 on hit. It's a 10 frame string you can use with Yoshimitsu. Now, in no sword stance, it knocks down, it wall splats, and on the last hit, if it counter hits, it gives you a launch. Now, players don't like this, and for a good reason, really. The move itself is -9, and the properties don't change if you're in heat or in no sword stance. It is still -9. So what I think they should do to nerf the move is just make it so that 1-1, the last hit of the move, no longer counter hit launch in no sword stance or in heat, and that it shouldn't wolf splat anymore either. Now, I said that heat specifically, that it also shouldn't really work, right? But if I had to be a little bit biased here, just remove the properties while you're not in heat. So you can still keep the properties of the wall splatting motions of the move, and maybe even the counter hitting properties as well. But that it should only work while you're in no sword stance, in heat. That's what I think. So again, if you're in heat, only able to wall splat with 1-1 in no sword stance in heat, and that it should only counter hit launch in the last hit in heat if you're in no sword stance. If they were to do that, that would at least have some layer as to how 1-1 should be used, and you can still then go for the move. Now for 3-2-1+2, this is another move that people don't like. The fact that it's tied to your 3-1 as well is another really big problem as to why players don't like Yoshimitsu's overall neutral game. Because even though in my belief, is that neutral for Yoshimitsu is quite bad, he has a lot of moves that a lot of neutral game that it's just not really all that amazing for what it is. Like, the only really good neutral moves is 3-2-1+2 and 3-1. These are the only good neutral moves, but everything else is quite ass. So what could they do with 3-2-1+2? Now, 3-2-1+2 does too much damage at the wall or even at the center stage. If you hit the opponent with the last 2 hits, it's 41 damage. Mind you, it only works if the last 2 hit connects. So if the second hit connects, then the third one will connect, but not with the first hit. Now, if you were to perform it while trying to do it in the no sword stance, it does 51 damage. So that's 10 extra damage if you perform it in no sword stance. And of course, if you perform it while you're near the wall, it gives them a wall splat. So it makes sense why people don't really like this move so much, because it does too much damage. So just nerfing the overall damage component of it, like maybe dealing like around maybe 50% less damage, so it does 21 damage instead, and then while in no sword stance it does 31. I think that's what they should do, but then if they were to do that, that would be too much of a significant nerf to 3-2-1+2. So I think if anything, maybe make it so that 3-2-1+2 in regular state gives him like 31, and then 41 if he's in no sword stance. Now in the case of 3-1, I feel like 3-1 should be kept the way it is. There's already a lot of characters that have a lot of plus frame moves he can use, and this was his only real good one that he can use at the neutral, 3-1. That also heat engages. But if I had to add anything, at the least, make it so that 3-1 on the last hit to be slower. So it's 22 frames on startup. How about making it around like 26 frames on startup instead? So that way they have enough time to then duck the move. Now, in the next case is his sword sweep or his samurai cutter. Now, what they could do to make the move a lot more bearable is that instead of making it around 26 frames on startup, which is still relatively how should I say, reactable, but a lot of players don't think it's reactable. Just like how a lot of players don't like that Jin's down 2. A lot of players say that it's reactable, but it's not really reactable unless you're looking for it. Same thing with Samurai Cutter. But I still think that it's a lot more reactable in comparison to down 2 with Jin, because for one, he can just do it while standing. But Yoshimitsu has to go crouching first and then shimmy a little bit to then get the Samurai Cutter. If I do it at the fastest point, you still can see that he's crouching first and then trying to shimmy a little bit to go into Samurai Cutter. Of course, you can do it even faster if you just do it like this. But you can still see that he has to go into a crouching state first. And mind you, the majority of his setups, he has to shimmy a little bit to try to make you think that he's going to go for Samurai Cutter into Gehosen. But I would say at least make it so that it's around from 26 frames on startup to maybe 28 frames on startup. So it's a little bit slower, making it a little easier for players to actually react to the move. Another thing also is that players think that this does too much damage if you do the full combo. If you do the full combo route, in the highest damaging route, it does 56 damage. I'm pretty sure this is the highest damaging output combo you can go with Samurai Cutter, but it does 56 damage from a low unblockable. Now mind you, because it's a slow unblockable, which a lot of people don't think it is, but it's 26 frames on startup, but again, if they were to nerf it to 28 frames, I think that the damage is relatively fine for Yoshimitsu. If they were to nerf the damage somewhat, then maybe make it around like 5 less points of damage, or make it maybe even just like 10 damage less than what it is, so that way it's a little bit, you know, bearable for the players that are getting hit by Samurai Cutter. But I feel that the only thing that they should nerf is simply just nerf the startup frames a little bit, and maybe nerf the damage a little bit by 5 HP points. Then he has his Poison Breath. A lot of players don't like this move either, but mind you, this is another move that has a big tell. If he goes into that stomach state, this is actually a stance, but it's not really a main stance of his. If he goes into this, he can then go for Poison Breath, or go for a flip. Now, the thing about this is that if he does Poison Breath, it has a lot of range. So, I guess the only thing that they should nerf with the move is decrease the overall range of the move and the damage that it does against the opponent. This does 25 damage. So maybe instead of making 25, make it like 15, and then still decrease the overall distance that it reaches with the move. But if I had to be a little bit biased here, I still would like to keep the range where it hits, but just decrease the damage to 10. Then for his other unblockables that he has, like Windmill. Windmill is very slow. Like, it looks fast because, again, a lot of players get, like, this kind of syndrome where, just like a deer at the headlights, they'll look at the move and they stay super shocked and scared to move. So they just, you know, try to do something, like try to attack him and interrupt him, when they should be backstepping away from Yoshimitsu when he does the Windmill. Or, which is best, it's just simply backstep and then sidestep. The reason why is that in the case that he goes for the stab instead. But again, easier said than done, because a lot of players still have the reaction speed of a snail. Sorry. But yeah, you have to be a little bit more reactable with the move itself. It's not that fast. But if I had to say anything with the move, I guess make it even a slightly bit more slower, I guess. Mind you, this has been slowed down in Tekken 8 comparatively to Tekken 7, I think, because from how I feel, it used to be slightly faster. It's only faster while you're in your no sword stance. You see that? About 20 frames. But it's a high. You can actually duck the move. And not only that, you can actually sidestep the move as well, because unlike with the regular Windmill, this can actually be stepped or sidewalked. Now, I don't have to mention anything about his damage. We all know that his damage is pretty high for what it can do, but it's only relatively high if he has the wall. If he were to do his damage normally, he does 68 damage. Now, this is a very easy combo until you get to the last part where you do the just frame. It's harder for a lot of players that don't know how to perform the just frame of forward, forward, 2, 2. But you get 68 with that. If you were to go with this route instead, it does 67. It's a lot easier to perform, but you have to simply step to the right side or to the left depending on the character to actually get the move to hit. So you would think that it would be a lot harder, but seeing that you can do this one and it does 1 extra damage in comparison. So depending on the combo route, you could do more damage, but I usually go for 4-4-2 so that I can stay near the opponent and still go for setups. So if they have to nerf the damage overall, I think, again, like I just mentioned with 3-2, 1+2, it's really this move that's really making the move do too much damage when he performs his combos. I feel like his combo route, in terms of his damage, is already pretty good for what it is. I don't think it needs to be nerfed. But if they had to nerf anything, I feel like the actual launching move that needs to be nerfed is his Kensho back 2-1. This does 34 damage, comparatively to something like this that only does 13. Or this, it does 15. Or this, it does 22. If I do it with this one, he does 88 damage. And if I were to go for the 4-4-2-2 just frame, about 89. So it does do a lot of damage. But you also have to remember that this is minus 12. So if they were to just simply nerf the back 2-1 in terms of damage and make it around minus 13 to minus 14, that seems more fair. Now the other thing that players don't like about Yoshimitsu is his Kensho 4-1 and his Dragonfly into 4-1+2. Now the reason why they hate the move specifically is because the move does too much chip damage. With these 2 moves alone, you have already done 26 damage in terms of chip damage. If you're in heat, you're doing 38 on these 2 moves alone. So overall, universally, they should just nerf the damage component of chip damage for all characters, not just for Yoshimitsu. Because there are a lot of characters in the game that have their own ways of performing their chip damage against the opponent. Though, of course, there's ones that are more egregious, like Alisa, that can just simply go for this, something similar to this, and just spamming it in their destructive form with 1, or I think it's like forward 1. Now to the big hitters. When it comes to the guard break setup, a lot of players don't like this move as well. For one, it performs like this. You get plus 15 or plus 14 depending on the situation. Right there, I got plus 15, which I got really lucky. That means that I can actually go for a down forward 2 and launch Kazuya if I wanted to. But because I can only really see it because of the HUD, I really wouldn't have known that unless I were in practice mode. And funny enough, this guard break setup works against the ladies, where the ladies, if you perform a specific type of combo route like this, you get plus 15 if they decide to go for a side okeme. So, for good reason why players don't like the setup for how strong it is. So what they should do instead is that when Yoshi goes for the setup, and let's say you're knocked down, if you go for the fully charged move, or not, it should not hit grounded. I think that's one way to nerf the particular setup. So that way, if you choose to stay grounded, the Yoshi can only really tell whether or not if the opponent is too, let's say, impatient, or if you apply too much mental frames to where they want to get up immediately, right? So then they get caught by the guard break setup. So this overall destroys the setup completely. Well, not completely, actually. I'm being hyperbolic here. But if they destroy it in that sense, then that way you won't get hit by the move, it won't do too much damage to you, and then you are able to either go for a toe kick, or a wake up mid kick, or even a spring kick to beat the opponent. Now, might I add that if you're performing the one at the wall, this can actually be beaten. You can go for a toe kick, a get up kick, or even a spring kick. Now, you could go for a wake up mid kick, but it's a little slower, and there's a big chance that you might not make it in time to actually hit Yoshimitsu out of the fully charged 1+2. But the other 3 options are also good enough, so that way you're able to stop Yoshimitsu from going for the fully charged move. Of course, if the Yoshi wanted to, they can just go for the regular move itself and not go for the charge, and that way they can still get hit. But again, the biggest problem is the guard break setup itself, not really just the non-charge version of the attack. So even though this is a video having to do with nerfs, this is a way you can actually counter the move itself. I actually mentioned it in one of my previous videos having to do with Mayman's idea as to how you fight Yoshimitsu, and you can look it up yourselves if you want to, or I can put it up right here or link it down to the description if you want to see the video. Now the last thing that, well, not really the last thing, this is the second to last thing you can mention about Yoshimitsu's nerfs. The one thing is, of course, his flash. Now, his flash is very infamous in the game. A lot of players don't like this move, for good reason, because it destroys any semblance of what you can do against Yoshimitsu when you're trying to go for your mix-ups or your plus frame mix-ups. For example, if Kazuya were to go for his down back 4 and goes for down forward 2 for a setup to try to counter hit launch you, I can just go for my flash. Same thing if I were to do it in my no sword stance. It completely stops the entirety of what the opponent's trying to do against you when they set you up. Flash in itself being 6 frames on startup and 8 frames in no sword stance. What they could try doing instead to nerf the move is this way, which a lot of Yoshi players are not going to like it, but if it's a big change they have to do with Yoshimitsu to cater to the audience and cater to the pros as well, because a lot of pros don't like Yoshi either, and that is to make it so that in the default state, make this 10 frames, and then for the no sword stance version, make it around 12 frames. That way, Kazuya, if he wants to go into his setups, that if he wants to have his +4 or +5 on hit, or in a mix-up of some sort, he doesn't have to worry about getting hit by flash, right? We have to figure out a different way to actually get around it. For example, as the Yoshi main here, if you were to get hit by the move, his setup, down back 4 into his down forward 2, you can do this instead. You can try parrying the move coming out. But easier said than done, because if he times it correctly or delays it, you will get hit by the move and you just fail trying to go for your Kensho parry. But at least that's something, right? Now to demonstrate, if it were to be 10 frames on startup, the flash, and or 12 frames on startup if it was in the no sword stance version, this is what will happen in that scenario. The Kazuya still gets the counter hit launch against the opponent, but they get staggered a little bit, so it may change exactly how they go for their combo routes. Now that flash, well, it does stagger more than the 10 frame jab, but they'll still have enough time to go for at least their back 2-2, into their down forward 1, into down forward 2, to go for the launch, and so forth, right? Depending on how they want to go for the combo route. Now, if it were the case, if we were using the no sword stance, that would be changed from 12 frames in this idea, I would get hit. Now, my 12 frame with Yoshimitsu is my down forward 4. This is 12 frames on startup. So if my no sword stance flash was 12 frames, that actually gets beaten by that setup. So this means that a lot of characters can have ways to actually circumvent the problem with flash if it were turned into 10 frames on startup with the regular flash and 12 frames in no sword stance. Now in terms of the damage component of flash itself, I think it should be kept. It's a big punishing move. If they were to make that change to changing the startup frames, at least keep the damage that comes from doing the flash. And now it comes to the other component of flash. On block, it's -15. And a lot of players can't really react to this quickly enough because I can't deny that the animation when blocked is a little bit disingenuous. It gives the feeling that Yoshi is actually safe on block, or that you really can go for a launch. And it's only 15 frames, so not a lot of players are going to react and go for their 15 frame launchers. So if anything, flash, either in your default state or no sword stance, I'm just using the no sword stance version because it has more range, it should be not 15 frames on block, but let's say make it around -18. Maybe that'll give them enough time to actually go for a launch. If I have to go for anything higher than that, maybe 19 frames. That way you can go for your down forward 2 or your hop kick, or maybe even go for a much bigger punish if you have a bigger launching punish you can use against Yoshimitsu. But then again, that'll still go back to the same problem that Yoshimitsu's move is ambiguous for its overall recovery. So again, just make it around either -18 or -19 to make it easier for the players to actually launch. If anything, if it were me and my own biases, keep it to -15, but change the actual blocking animation when you were blocked with flash. Like, make it so that when he ends up using flash and the opponent blocks it, make it so that the sword itself kind of like ricochets. right? Like it just bounces on the opponent as if it was a wall. If they were to do that, that will give you a hint. Oh, he's minus 15. I can launch him now. Or you can still make it around like maybe minus 17 at the least, and then still give him the ricochet like animation when he does the flash either in either state, and then that will give you the hint. Oh, he blocked it. I can now launch you with my down forward 2, or I can launch you with my hop kick. Now, the last thing, and the biggest thing they could do to nerf Yoshimitsu is his wall game. I really feel, as a Yoshi main, that the only real part of him that makes him broken is not the flash, it's not the samurai cutter, it's not his unblockables, it's not his back 3 and back 4. The biggest issue with Yoshimitsu is when he gets you at the wall. He becomes extremely scary to actually fight against. Then it forces you to guess to what he's going to do. And the reason why is because of 4-1+2. 4-1+2 flips the opponent, which I failed to do right there. As you see, it flips them. So if it flips them, you actually have Oki here to actually do whatever you want. And from what the main man has demonstrated in one of his videos, he mentions that you really couldn't do anything against him. That if you were to get hit by this and you're in heat, that you just get spammed by 4-1+2. That's not entirely true, because you could still Saito Kemi away, but the problem is that if the Yoshi sees that you're going to attempt to go for a Saito Kemi, I can go for my samurai cutter setup. Now, the reason why I'm saying that flip is the problem is that if you flip the opponent over, it gives you Oki. It gives you enough time to actually do whatever you want. But another move that Yoshi used to have in Tekken 7 that used to flip the opponent was Gehosen. This move right here. If I were to use that move against the opponent now, it would not work, because they can go for something like this, for example. As you can see, you can actually go for a toe kick to stop the Yoshimitsu from doing anything. And the better option to handle the situation is to not actually do anything while going for an attack. Instead, stand right back up. As you see, they block it. And seeing that Gehosen is minus 17, that's why if you were to somehow block the move in a certain scenario in Tekken 7, you get launched for it. In Tekken 8, they made it easier because 4-1+2 is minus 12 on block, and the move is 20 frames on startup instead. In the case of Gehosen, it's actually 17 frames, but depending on the execution, it could be around 20 to 21 frames. But as long as they nerf the overall flip of the move, you have time to actually then, stand right back up and then punish the incoming move. If it would be the case that you were to go for a stand, and I'm going for my, let's say my samurai cutter, right? I will have enough time to actually get up and then go for a hop kick. Now, it may seem like that's not the case because of what I'm showcasing here, but if I was the dummy, so as an example, if let's say if the opponent were to use the move against me, and instead of going for the 4-1+2 as an example, and instead go for the samurai cutter setup, and I stand right back up, I can still retaliate. As you can see, I'm actually able to actually go for my hop kick. Or even going for my up forward 4, which is 20 frames in comparison to my hop kick, which is around 15 frames. Now then again, it is a low crushing move. But I can go for my down forward 1, which is 13 frames, and I can still beat him. So as you can see, there is an option to beat it if they were to nerf the actual problem with 4-1+2 flipping the opponent over. This way you're able to then get away from the setup itself. Now, instead of being a 50-50 force mix-up, it's a 50-50 if you, the opponent, have too much mental frames built up and you're hesitant and hesitating to attack the opponent right afterwards, or to figure out how to attack Yoshimitsu. Now, to add in, since the problem is 4-1+2, instead of making it minus 12 on block, maybe make it around minus 14 on block. Or launch punishable at minus 15 instead. This way that if you were to get caught by this option instead, even though you could just stand up and then block it once the flip is nerfed, then at least you can able to then punish it accordingly. Because being minus 12, okay, it's fine, but being a homing move that's also a heat engager, it seems a bit too far. So instead, just make it so instead of minus 12, make it around minus 13 or minus 14. And if you really want to go so far as to nerf it even more, make it around minus 15. But if I had to be fair, as I'm also a Yoshi main, I would say instead make it minus 13 or 14. 14 maybe, I would say. And then that's it. That's really what they should do to nerf Yoshimitsu. Everything else in his kit is fine. Like, if you think that his issue is too strong in other components of his gameplay, I really don't think so. Because the issues that people complain about the most has to be with the moves that I just mentioned. Everything else is fine. If I was to say anything really, and this is my bias talking, the only thing they need to do is to nerf flash, so it's 10 frames to 12 frames when you're using it either in your regular state, in normal sword stance state, and then lower the damage. Everything else will be fine. Or maybe also nerf the wall Oki setup as well, and then that's it. So besides that, I have mentioned what I think what they should do to nerf Yoshimitsu. If you guys enjoyed the video, or if you like what I just said, maybe you'll dislike the video instead, you can go ahead and do so as well. And yeah, stay tuned and stay safe.
Salute to all my fallen soldiers. I reminisce of a time gone. I never thought I would be in a